Hi, welcome to the extra practice for density video. This video is for students who have watched the previous two videos in your document. And after watching those videos, when you got started on the practice, you're not sure where to start. If you do know where to start and what to do, you should just go ahead and solve these problems. And of course, check your answers on the next page in the document that's linked, and then correct any mistakes. And remember, you're doing this work on a separate sheet of paper, so you can show me on Monday. So if you need to pause right now, go ahead and pause and grab that piece of paper. All right, so for those of you who are like, well, how do I get started on these problems? First of all, in all these problems, you're asked to solve for something. And you're either going to be asked to solve for the density, mass, or the volume of a sample of matter. Okay, so let's talk about what information they provide you here. They provide you with the triangle setup that you can use, which you saw in the previous video. And they also provide you here with three equations. One if you're solving for density, the second one if you're solving for volume, and the third one if you're solving for mass. Now, since your videos you've seen have used the triangle, that's what we're going to focus on. That's because this is it doesn't take that much to remember how to set up the triangle. So I'm going to show you that. At the end of this video, what I'm going to do for those of you who are confident in your algebra is I'm actually going to show you how to solve this using algebra. Because when you're using algebra, you only have to memorize this equation. And I think that that is actually a really strong and important skill. So I want to show you what that looks like as well. All right, let's get started with solving these problems. So in the first problem, you're given the mass, 40 grams, and the volume, 20 milliliters. And you're asked to find the density. So what you're going to do is go into your triangle is figure out what numbers you can place in, replace your variables with, and then what's your unknown. So this is our unknown because we're solving for density, and we can plug in mass and volume. Now remember, for this triangle, it's set up such a way that any of the values that are above and below the line that goes straight across, they're going to be divided. So mass divided by volume, or mass divided by density, or mass divided by volume. And any of the values that are on either side of the horizontal line the vertical line that goes straight down, they're going to be multiplied. So since we're looking for density here, I'm going to rewrite density over here, equals, and it's going to be mass divided by volume. Okay. So I just took the information from this equation. Since I'm solving for density, that's going to be off on its own on the left side of the equation, the equal sign. And then the other two that I have the value for are going to be on the right side. Now all I do is I just plug in my numbers. So where I see mass, I'm going to plug in 40, and where I see volume, I'm going to plug in 20. Since I don't have a value for density, I'm going to rewrite this density equals, since this is my unknown. So I don't have a number to plug in for that. But for my mass, I'm going to plug in 40. And for my volume, I plug in the 20. And I ignore the units for right now. Okay, so then in your calculator, you would do 40 divided by 20. And that will give you 2. This equals to 2. All right, the last step is to get the units. Now, the key thing about the units, which we talked about earlier in class, is that for density, the units are going to be the units of the mass over the units of volume. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug these back in, G over ml. I like to do them at the end, which means that the units for this value of density is going to be grams per ml or grams per milliliter. And I can go ahead and rewrite that here. And remember, this sort of slash line is the same thing as writing this horizontal line, just on its side. Okay, so that's the first one done. I'm going to do one more example for you, and then I'll show you how to solve this using algebra. So in the next example I'll do is number 6. In this case, you're given the density, and you're given the volume. So you have values, you have numbers for that, right? Numerical values for that. And you're looking to find the mass. Okay, so I'm going back up to my triangle. So my unknown, what I'm trying to find is my mass. So that is my unknown. And what I have are my density and volume. So I have these two things. So remember, the unknown, the thing you're looking for, is going to stay by itself. It's going to be isolated by itself on the left side of the equal sign. The two things that you're looking for, they're going to be on the right side of the equal sign. And the triangle tells you what you're going to do to those two variables, density times volume. So these two are going to be multiplied. So I'm just going to rewrite it that way. Now that I have that, all I need to do is start plugging in the number. So remember, your unknown, when I drop it down on the next line, I'm going to keep that as my unknown. I don't have a value for mass. But I do have one for density, so that's 2. And I do have one for volume. That's 20, so I just plug those in. And when I do the math there, I get 40. 2 times 20 is 40. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put my number down. But I can't forget my units. So for my units, the last thing I want to do for my units is, when you're solving for units, remember that the units for the mass must match what you see in the density unit. So remember, the mass unit will be on top. So whatever unit is on top will go for your mass. That will be G. Okay, so 40 grams. All right, so that is it for this problem. Now I want to tell you that if you were, for example, solving for volume, for V, then you would use the unit on the bottom. So if this was volume, I would put milliliters here. Okay, but since it's mass, it's the one on top. Okay, so if you have seen that and you like using the triangle, proceed on. But if you want to see how to use some algebra skills, I'll show you. All right, so this is how I solve these problems using algebra. I don't like memorizing a lot of stuff, and so for me, relying on math principles and math rules are really helpful and really beneficial. So that's what I usually tend to do. All right, so let's take a look at the equation. Density is equal to mass over volume. That's all I ever need to know. And what I do with that equation is I identify what I'm given. I'm given mass in this problem. I'm given mass is equal to 40 grams. I'm giving volume is equal to 20 milliliters. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I am going to plug the numbers into this equation first. Now, some people, what they do is they rearrange the equation if they need to, but I like to plug it in first. So wherever I see mass, I'm going to plug that in there. I'm going to plug that in there. Okay. So that gives me a new equation of density is equal to 40 over 20. And that one's pretty simple. Again, that gives me 40 divided by 20, which is 2. And again, the units would be grams per milliliter. So that part's easy when it's just plugging it into this equation. But what happens if you have to solve for mass or volume? How do you use algebra for that? Okay, so let's take a look at that example. In example 6, again, I'm using the same equation, density equals mass over volume. And I'm given density is equal to 2 grams per milliliter. And the volume is equal to 20 milliliters. And what I want to do is solve for the mass. So in this case, once again, I'm going to plug it into where I see it. So density, I plug that in here. Volume, I plug that in there. Okay. Now when I plug that in, I get 2, so plugged in the 2 for the density, is equal to m over 20. Okay. Now here's where the algebra comes in. When you are trying to solve an equation in algebra, remember you're going to use inverse or opposite operations to isolate your unknown variable. So I want to get the m by itself. It's sort of like a video game, right? So to get the m by itself, I need to use an inverse operation. So what is an inverse operation? Well, first I need to see what operation is occurring between the number and the unknown on the same side of the equal sign. So the number that's on the same side of the equal sign as the mass is 20, and the mass is being divided by 20. Okay, well, I want to move that 20 over on the other side. So what's the inverse operation of division? That would be multiplication, right? So if I multiply this side by 20, that will get rid of the 20 on the right side of the equal sign. But the other cool thing about math is that whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So if I multiply the right side by 20, I have to multiply the left side by 20. So now both sides are multiplied by 20. I can go ahead and cross that out. I like to think of it as using like a samurai sword or something when I use my inverse operations to remove numbers from the unknown. I like treat it like a samurai sword. Cross it out. All right, so now I have on this side 20 times 2, which is 40, is equal to my mass. All right, and that gives me the same answer that I got here. Of course, I have to go back and look at my units here and then make sure it's putting the units, on the side, grams. Now, notice how I have 40 grams is equal to mass. Usually what we do is we usually write it as the mass, so the unknown on the left side, and then the number on the right side. Just because we read from left to right. That's the reason why we write it this way. But in math, both of these equations are fine. It's just that by convention, this is the one we prefer. Okay. All right, that is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Have a quality day.